guys for supporting us on YouTube and all the other places we are on the podcast platforms. I want to thank Brendan for coming on last week, Brendan Kelly. We got to talk about, I guess it was more about the history of psychiatry. We went down the route of his first book is about the history of psychiatry. His second book is about his journey, kind of to find out about the treatment of mental illness in different countries, and he traveled to different countries. It's a fascinating chat. If you haven't caught up with it yet, I would highly recommend it. I just want to say thanks to, I should have done in the last few weeks. I've been attending Kieran McNally. Kieran McNally was on before, if people don't know. He's a pain and movement specialist. So I probably whinged about this before, but I had a medial ligament tear in my left knee, and Kieran was helping me through it. And as I was, getting really far on the rehab and stuff, I strained a tendon to my right knee, so I was walking funny. But I've still been going to him. I'm going to him again today. But he has been brilliant, and he's in Athlone here in Monksland. So Kieran McNally, pain and movement specialist. Just want to give a big shout out to him, because he's great for gaining confidence when it comes to injuries, and realizing that you don't just sit there and wait for it to heal. You have to move, and in a controlled manner, of course. That's that. So we'll get into this week's episode. My guest today is a body confidence coach, and her name is Cliona Byrne. How are you doing, Cliona?
I'm good. How are you, Derek?
I'm very well, thanks. We just had a chat about the weather. We won't go through that again. We will save the people having to listen to it. But I want to just, I suppose, I want to crack on with it, because it's got quite a number of questions to kind of cover. But we always start with a short history of your upbringing, please.
So I grew up in Hollywood in County Wicklow, and I grew up on a farm, and I had a really lovely childhood. I grew up with my parents and my brother, and next door were my grandparents, and my other grandparents were across the lake.
Mm-hmm.
And it was lovely. Grew up on the mountains, in the mountains, no shop, no nodding and walking distance. And I used to get the bus to school and everything. And it was lovely. It was a really nice childhood. So that's where I grew up.
It sounds lovely. I've never been. When you said Hollywood, I was like, wow, this is but yeah, Hollywood. But County Wicklow, one of the most beautiful counties in Ireland.
And we have like it's very funny. We've got like a little Hollywood sign up on the hill, but it's really small and surrounded by sheep, but it's quite funny. So.
Excellent. It's very, very Irish, isn't it? That.
Yeah.
Cliona, when did you become first aware of mental health?
I think it was when I was around the age of 10 or 11, it started to become clear to me. My granny became quite ill. And then when I was 11, my granny and my great granny both passed away within a few months of each other. And at that time, I started getting quite bullied at school as well. I had two girls in particular calling me fat and ugly on a daily basis. And that spread out to the rest of my class and the class above and the class below, also saying these things to me. So for the last 2 years of my time in primary school, they were awful. And I was filled with anxiety and feelings of depression at that age because of everything that was going on around me. So I think that's when I became aware of it. Regards, I knew that you could go from feeling quite good to not feeling quite good. And then also because there had been like 2 funerals and 2 deaths in my family, I saw that my parents and the people around me went from feeling quite good to quite low. So that's when I was aware of the fact that we're not always on one level. Because as a kid, you often are, apart from like, if you get annoyed because someone, I don't know, my brother took my Game Boy or something, but the rest of the time it was pretty level. So it became aware to me that actually when you're feeling low, it can be longer than just like an hour when you're upset over something small.
It's very young to have to kind of deal with it, isn't it? And when you went to secondary school, did it become a little bit better for you?
It did become a lot better.
Okay.
I basically decided that I wasn't going to take anyone's nonsense when I was going to go to secondary school. But at the same time, I did some things that were really negative. But what I thought were positive, I like the summer before I went to secondary school, I did a lot of stupid stuff in order to try shrink my body and to be more acceptable, because I thought that if I could make myself smaller and more palatable to other people, that they would leave me alone. And I was left alone, but I don't think it was because of that. I think it was because I came in with more of an attitude of, don't you dare say anything to me. And the kids I went to primary school with were still in school with me in secondary school, but they backed off because the main person that was bullying me actually went to a different school altogether. So there was no one really pushing for it.
No ringleader as such, like you to get away from it. So I introduced you as a body confidence coach. What is a body confidence coach?
So what I do is I help people to accept their bodies, make peace with them, and like the bodies that we're in. That's what I do in a
Mm,
nutshell. It's all about having a good relationship with yourself. And what I always say to people is that our relationships with ourselves are the number one relationship in our lives. We all think it's like, no, it's our relationship with our partner, our
mm,
parents, our kids, but it's the one with yourself because it's the foundation for everything else in your life. So if that foundation is just, crumbling and cracked and in an awful state, it's going to be really difficult to build romantic relationships, friendships, your career, on top of that, because the cracks will always show up in everything else. So it's about comfortable with the body you have and not being in the state of need. I need to change the way I look. I'm not good enough. If I change the way I look, then my life will be better. And constantly waking up just feeling like about ourselves.
There is because you mentioned there about like even in secondary school where you wanted to change something about yourself to, to placate others, I guess, like, to make others feel acceptable about you. And I find that with my mental health a few years ago now, not so much now, that I needed to fit in, and I wasn't open about how I felt with regards to anxiety and depression and things like that. So I tended to act a lot, and that trying to act every time you leave the house, putting on a show or putting on an act for people, it's such an exhausting thing. That as soon as you get home, you close the door, everything, you're just drained because you're not yourself, you're not comfortable in the situation, you've changed everything. And I imagine what we're talking about when we talk someone who has low self-esteem when it comes to body issues, that it can be a similar thing where they are really struggling within, but outside of themselves, they're trying to be something different and not, comfortable in themselves.
Oh yeah. And the way it shows up is a little bit different, but it's really interesting. So how we can know that we're struggling with this is, for example, if we wake up and maybe the first thing you do is, go to the loo to empty your bladder so you can be as light as possible, to then go weigh
Mm,
yourself. Then you're looking in the mirror and you're scanning your body, you're looking for flaws. And the rest of the day, you're really thinking about what you're eating. You're really thinking about how your body looks. You're really thinking about how everyone else's body looks.
mm,
And you're just constantly thinking about it. And the thing that's quite interesting about when we struggle with our body is that people don't wear the mask in the same way as they would for if they're feeling anxiety or depression.
mm,
What they usually do is they will let it show by being very critical of their own body openly.
mm.
So saying, oh, I really need to lose some weight. Oh, I look awful today. Oh, my hair is this, my clothes are that. So we'll actually show it because it's become socially acceptable to do that. But we'll also be maybe very critical of other people's
Mm.
bodies. We'll be saying, "Oh, did you see the state of Mary? Did you see that Sarah down the road is after gaining weight? Did you see that whoever, blah blah blah?" So we will actually show, like, it's very difficult to hide
Mm.
how awful we feel at times. And even for any way that anyone's feeling, we can wear the masks, but usually there's still some signs there that actually we're not feeling so great. And they always say, don't they, that the people that always seem the happiest and are always the most smiley don't always feel that way.
Yeah.
And it's true. And you can have people going around like celebrities who you would falsely presume feel great about their bodies, but that's usually not the case. They're under such stress to
Yeah.
maintain a certain appearance, to be a certain way. And if they're not always at the very top, they're criticized and torn to shreds by
Mm.
the public, both in the media and social media. So no one is exempt from this feeling of not feeling good enough in their skin. It's something that's universal and across the board.
So what was it that made you want to become a body confidence coach?
Well, I went through my own awful relationship with myself. When I was younger, I had a problem with my jaw. My jaw went to the side. So it's kind of
Mm.
like an overbite or an underbite, but to the side, because I always have to be different. And it meant that I couldn't like properly bite into things. So like if I bit into a sandwich, the bread would be gone, but like the ham would still be there.
Oh.
was really difficult. And I found ways to hide it. I would like kind of bite things from the side, and I had techniques, but I hid it in a lot of ways.
Okay.
And I really struggled with it. And I wore braces for years in order to have my teeth aligned, that once I had a jaw surgery, they'd actually close on top of each other. So I always knew that I was going to have my jaw broken, realigned, and have screws put in my face. So I had that operation when I was 20. And at that time, I had in my head that if I lost weight and once I got this operation, my life was going to change. Like it was going to be this like sparkly thing. And I was going to be like one of those women you see on like, I don't know, a pamphlet for a diet where she's eating salad and she's laughing and having the time of her life. Like I really thought my life was going to be amazing. So I went on a stupid diet. I lost weight. I had the surgery, which was a big surgery. And months passed and I healed. And I found myself looking in the mirror and saying to myself, well, maybe if I lost some more weight and maybe if I changed my hair, then maybe I'd feel that feeling. And it was like I woke up in that moment and I actually looked at myself and said out loud, when am I ever going to be good enough for myself? And something switched in my head that day. And I realized that I had been carrying around for 10 years this idea that I was not good enough because of my size and the way I looked. And it was like other people's narratives that I had adopted and decided were true and just carried them. And I don't know who I was trying to satisfy, because I definitely wasn't satisfying myself. So at that point, I went on my own journey, trying to figure it all out. But no one like me existed at the time. The body positivity movement, that was like there's been different layers of it, but the one that was on social media was only kind of starting to be born at that time. So there wasn't really much stuff. And I had to figure it out. And so years pass and I did figure it out. And I was working in a job I hated. I was a really good job, but I hated it. And I realized, wait a minute, what if I was actually to retrain and go help people with the thing that I figured out? Because I had become the person that I actually needed when I was younger. So I was like, okay, I'm going to retrain and I'm going to help other people figure this out, because I knew how painful it was to hate my body. And I also knew the pure joy and liberation of just not thinking about it anymore and not caring about it and actually putting my energy into other things. And I always say to people, if I could get back the mental energy I wasted on not liking myself, I'd probably have like 4 PhDs by now.
But like, it's obviously brilliant that you could do it. And I think what's brilliant now is that there's people like you out there to help, because this isn't like something that was always around. Like one, I mentioned psychiatry, which has been around like for a couple of hundred years, whatever. This is kind of a newer thing, but the body positive movement has been, like you said, it's got layers, but it has been rising and rising, and we're discussing it more. And it's allowing people to talk about it. And sometimes, well, a lot of the times that can be negative. Like I've been in, I go to the gym quite a bit, and I coach in there, so I talk to a lot of people in there. And like you mentioned, it's funny you mentioned it, I'm kind of thinking about it now. There is a lot of people who will almost make the comment about themselves because they think someone else is thinking that about them, and you kind of a lot of the time you kind of go, I don't know what you mean. I don't see that. That's not what I see, or whatever. But of course, we don't address it in that way because it feels too personal. It's like, let them talk and then kind of say, laugh it off and then move on to the next thing. I think it must be a long process to change someone's mind about something that they've been thinking about for maybe, like you said, 10 years or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have it down to a T now at this point, because I already know when someone's coming in as my client, what they're going to tell me and when they're going to tell it to me, because it's usually the same stories again and again, just kind of slightly rewritten. So when people come into me, they're already at a point where they have realized that they've tried everything regards. They've tried the diets, they've tried the fitness regimes, they've tried everything. And they still don't feel any different about their bodies, like I did. Like it took me getting screws in my face to go, wait a second, this didn't change anything. So they're at a point where they're like, nothing is actually changing anything. And it takes it takes a step of bravery to step outside of the comfort zone of doing repeatedly the things that hurt us. And what I mean by that is we'll often have like maybe dieting is like a comfort blanket where we feel like we can always return to it because that one time 10 years ago we lost a bit of weight and it didn't work full time. If diets worked, you'd only do it once. And then we go, well, maybe if I got back to that level of fitness I had back 15 years ago, maybe then I would feel better about my body. And we kind of forget that actually we didn't feel great about our bodies back then either. So it didn't make a difference. So it's to actually have that bit of self-awareness to say, this isn't working for me anymore. I need to try something else. So that's kind of where people come into it at. And when we start talking about it, it's usually a similar story to my own in the point that it started pretty young. It usually started with this awareness that we usually get, usually at the age of 10, where we realize that if everyone's judging everyone else's bodies, then I myself must be being judged as well. And then also what can happen is maybe a family member or someone we trust and love says something about our bodies that sticks with us forever.
Yeah.
That's very common. And I'm sure everyone listening to this will be like, oh yeah, I can think of that time that my, I don't know, granny told me I had a big fine arse.
Yeah.
You know, there could be anything, like, I never got over that. So there's always something like this. And it's the same kind of stories again. And then it's like how they struggled with it. And some people are more extreme than others. And the point of some people will go through where they've just never felt good, but they've never taken negative action against themselves. All the way to the scale of people who have eating disorders and people who maybe did extreme plastic surgery and things like this in order to try change themselves, and they still didn't feel any different. So there's this whole array of situations, but they usually kind of start from the same place and everyone has the same feelings, which is just like the only way I can describe really feeling bad about your body is it actually there's a physical pain to it. And the time that most people have experienced it is when you're in a changing room and nothing fits you and everything looks awful and the lighting makes you look bizarre and you're just like, I feel so bad about myself. Imagine feeling like that all the time. It really hurts.
This is something I mentioned you just before, but I've only said that I mentioned this to one person before, kind of talks about it. But when I never thought about my body in any kind of, not a negative or positive way. I never really thought about it in general as I was growing up. And I suppose a lot of people would say I was quite thin and I had an operation when I was 13 and I did lose quite a bit of weight. It was just a removal of the appendix, but I got a virus, or not a virus, what's it called? Yeah, is it a virus? Something like
infection?
Infection. There we go. Body expert. But so I lost a bit of weight then, but that was like, you look back at photos and you go, wow, like, but then I started having to take medication for, mental health reasons. And I started to put on a bit of weight and didn't think, again, you're still not thinking about it as such. It's not something that's, when you're going through a mental health thing, your body isn't the first thing you're thinking about, obviously. You're thinking of many different things. And then I realized I got back fit again, started running again. But I realized that I hated my torso area, just my chest and my stomach. Not my arms, legs, or anything to do with that. And it's funny, you touched on something very interesting there, because you mentioned about going into fitting rooms and things and the lighting. And you'll find something, because you'll put on, like, I'm just talking about like putting on t-shirts and not anything, nothing more extravagant or anything, but trying on a t-shirt and you're like, there's like a curve there and you're like, oh, that I can't wear that. Like, it shows off my, and I excuse the expression, man boobs, but we know what they are, what they're portrayed as. So I was kind of like so worried about that, and I was worried about my stomach, and I'm holding it in all the time, which is funny, because when I talk about anxiety and breathing correctly, you can't breathe correctly when you're holding your stomach in your. It's impossible to do, and it's an ongoing thing. It's never kind of been, every time I look down, I think of it in a negative light. And when I found you online and stuff, and I thought, like, this is a great thing to have on, because of the fact that people go through a lot because of their bodies, and they worry so much about their bodies, and they go through mental health issues because of their bodies. It can go to, like you said, it can go to really extreme lengths. But where I'm not quite up here, but I'm in the middle, where I'm constantly, it's a nagging chat that I have in my head every time I look down, like, and every time I get a new t-shirt. Someone said to me the other day, actually, and it wasn't anything to do with my body. It was just they asked why I always bought Mackenzie t-shirts. And I just look, they're not too expensive and they're a good fit. But I have it in my mind that they're the only t-shirts I can wear that actually don't accentuate what I don't want to be accentuated. And this is going on for a good few years now, a number of years now. And it's I can only imagine what other people further on the spectrum, I guess, of it go through every day, because it's a nagging thing for me, but for others, it could be a kind of hell for them.
Well, you know what you said there too is interesting. It's like, okay, there's always going to be people on the scale further up from you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the thing. But what you're going through is extremely valid, and it's a pain, and it's in many ways just as important as someone who's further along the scale. It's still the same thing. It just means that the way it's showing up in your life is a little bit different for them. And what you said is very interesting, because all the men that come to me always mention that they feel really uncomfortable with their chest. They're always mentioning their pecs and whether or not they have pecs or don't have pecs, or if they've man boobs or moobs or whatever you want to call them, and then their stomachs. And that's a big thing for men. People think it's always going to be about muscles and size of arms and stuff, but it's actually not. It's to do with that part of the body usually. And like, it's been going on for a good few years. So your body's probably changed in that time, hasn't it?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, it's not the same, but the feeling didn't change, did it?
No.
No. So it has actually nothing to do with your body. It has to do with how you're feeling about your body. And I'd be interested to know, back when this started, what were the narratives like during that time in your life? Because I'm going to guess, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, were there people who were like, oh, you're so skinny, look at you can eat whatever you want, you skinny thing? Was there that going on, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, right. And particularly with boys, this is what happens. Everyone's like, oh, you're such a skinny little lad, you can eat whatever you want. Oh, I wish I was like you. And that usually comes from women, actually. And then what happened after? What was the narrative?
It was funny because it never nobody mentioned it then. It was becoming my thing when I was gaining the weight. And of course, when like people know you're going through a lot. And look, I wasn't even going out and meeting people or something, or because of what the mental health side of things was really, really bad. But it started again when I went out, because if I mention it to a couple of people, like, and it still happens now, by the way, this is still like, if I say to someone in the gym, like, I'm putting on a couple of kg, they will always say, sure, there's no weight on you, and that's, look, they're saying it because whether they feel it or whether they just think, this is the nice thing to say, fair enough. But it's like, I'm sure you've heard it before, and I'm sure everybody's heard it before, where we just try to say nice things to people because that's what we're supposed to kind of do. But I guess what the narrative had changed to me being more outspoken about it. So then what was coming back tended to be positive, but I wasn't even listening to it.
No, but there's a few things there, right? So you've got, everyone's like, oh, you're skinny, la, la, la. And there's like, you're hearing a lot of positivity, to radio silence, to then your negative communication, and then you're hearing positive things back. But of course it's going to mean nothing to you, because the positive isn't coming without you saying the negative. So what happens there is you're receiving a lot of feedback that this body type is good. And then the radio silence is really important there, because it's still, no communication is still communication. It's being communicated to you. This was good, that was bad. That's why commenting on people's bodies, whether we think we're saying something positive or negative, is a really bad idea. Because if we praise someone for losing weight, we might think we're being great and be like, oh, if you lost weight, you look great. But the second they gain back any weight, they're going to think, oh no, everyone told me I was great this way. And now I'm receiving radio silence. All the praise, all the validation is gone. Something's wrong. It must be me. So that's the narrative that's after happening around you. And in that space, it's totally normal and understandable that you would start to say, wait a second. I was getting all this praise. I didn't even have to do anything for it. I had to go through my operation, but it's just a byproduct of that. Now I've lost that and I feel bad. What I would say to clients in that situation is we have to revisit that time. We have to go back to that time and be looking at you at that time and imagine that that version of you is sitting in front of you, and have the conversations with yourself that you need to have. because that version of you was good enough. He was good enough. I'm sure you looked fantastic. It was just at the time you didn't feel like you looked fantastic.
Yeah.
And of course, putting on t-shirts and seeing any little bit of anything that was probably, like, let's be honest, it was probably nothing,
Mm.
but it felt huge because it was huge to you, which meant it was there. That feeling was there. So
Yeah.
we have to revisit and heal that part of ourselves and go back and say, you're good enough. You look great. You're fantastic. And that's how we heal that. And it can be really tough to go back to the younger version of ourselves and be like,
Yeah, I often think as well, where when I was going through the, the real hard times of mental health, and that for me was when I was really hard on myself. I was hard on myself in the sense that, oh, like, nobody wants to be around me. Why would they? When I started to feel better with those side of things, it's like I needed to replace something. I needed to replace like the negativity and this, like, this, be self-critical and stuff. So I swapped that out for my my belly, and it seemed to be just a trade that I needed to have. And it's a thing that well, I don't know how many people, and I won't speak for people, but it's a thing that I seem to need, to have something to be critical of myself. I need to change something all the time, when, like you mentioned, which is the great way to look at things, to kind of accept it and say, oh, I feel, I look good. I should be accepting of these things. But again, it's that switch of the mindset that's obviously quite difficult to kind of come about.
oh yeah, and I think a lot of us do that. We blame all the bad feelings on a part of ourselves, and it
Mm,
could be anything. It could be your eyebrows, your nose, your weight. It doesn't matter what it is, but we'll put the blame on that thing and we'll
mm.
convince ourselves if we just change that one thing, that's when the sparkly, magical, great feelings come. And
Yeah.
it's never that, unfortunately. I mean, if it was, I mean, if that was the case, then after my operation, I would have been, I don't know, feeling absolutely
Mm,
amazing. And I was not. I still felt poo about myself. So we have to kind of take a step back from ourselves at times and cut through our own nonsense
mm.
and say, hold on a second, is it really realistic that everything that's going on in my life and all the bad feelings are being caused by the way my elbow skin hangs or
Yeah.
the way that, or that like
Yeah.
bit of acne on my back? Is that really the cause of all my problems in life? And is anyone else actually looking at me like that?
Yeah.
Because when we look at other people, like, we're not paying attention to that stuff. Like, when we're walking down the street, we're thinking, what am I going to eat for lunch? Oh, I need to go to
Mm,
the pharmacy. We're not thinking, God, if they just sculpted that bit of themselves,
mm.
they would be something else. Like, no one's really thinking that, but we apply it to ourselves. So again, it's like what happened to me. I had to take a step back and say, what am I actually on about?
Yeah.
Because, none of us are always right. And that
No.
includes our own thoughts. Our thoughts can't always be right. Like, sometimes I'll have a funny thought and I'll be like, no,
Yeah. No,
that's
it's
not
true.
right.
Yeah, it's true. And sometimes, I know it's a very dismissive thing that Irish people say. I think my granny used to say it. Somebody I know used to say, they used to say, Asher, who'd be looking at you? And sometimes that's not a bad way to kind of hold it. You can hold that in a positive way. You can hold that in a very negative way. But let's hold it in the positive way. Listen, Cliona, I just want to read out an advert and we'll fly back into it. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Let's get this right. I think I messed up last year. Fusion Training Center. Yeah, messed up. Fusion Training twice. Fusion Training Center, Monksland, Athlone. A place to train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, kickboxing, martial arts, and CrossFit. A great atmosphere with experienced coaches and a real sense of community. If you want to join the team, find us on Facebook at Fusion Training Center or drop in for a chat. Fusion Training Center, train like a warrior. Third time is a charm, I suppose. So talk to me about body positive parenting.
Yeah. So this is a really interesting thing that occurred for me passing time working as a body confidence coach. I started to see that there was a pattern that was there, and it was something I kind of ignored it in the beginning, because it meant that I would have to really dig deep on my own stuff. And anyway, what I realized was that we all inherit our hang-ups from our parents. So this means that when parents or anyone that's like very close to a child has poor body image, they pass it on to the kid grows up, they pass it on, and that's the cycle that we all live in. And every single family has what I like to call a body image culture. every family has it, right? So it could be that your family are like, let's say, really into everyone having to be super fit and I don't know, be physically a certain way, or everyone's really into dieting, or everyone's really into wearing designer clothes, or maybe your family are just 100% not into any of that and they don't care. So there's lots of different ways that it shows up in families. It could be that, you know, silly things, even like no one in our family can wear stripes because we all look awful in stripes. You know, like it could be anything, right? But we all have one. And so you can grow up in a positive one that helps you feel really great about your body, or you can grow up in a negative one. So I did my own research and started to develop this idea of, what if I worked with parents to help them get rid of their own hangups so they didn't pass it on to their kids? Because we know the pain of not liking ourselves. No one wants a child to experience that. And the only way to stop it is to become this like body confident role model for our kids. So that's how that developed. And it's been really interesting. I'm probably most known for that program. And I've had a lot of parents from all over the world come to me where they're like, oh my goodness, because usually it clicks with parents when there's something they said about themselves or they did, and then they see their child say the same thing, and that's usually when they're up and saying, no, I can't do this. It's early. People have memories of when someone in the family something early. And if we look back on it too, we can usually see the pattern develop. And most of us just don't realize it because it's just the norm in our families. But if we look back, we can start to see, well, actually, you know what? I got really into dieting when I was a teenager. And at the time, my mum was doing a diet. Or I always felt like it was really important for me to wear labels because that's what my parents always told me. And I got like a weekend job just so I could buy those clothes for myself. I even put myself into debt trying to keep up with the appearances that my family expected. So this is how it shows up. And it's the only way to stop this is to become the person in your family who is body confident. So I had to look back at how the women in my family spoke about their bodies. And all the women in my family are gorgeous, voluptuous women like myself, very curvaceous, really incredible women, really strong, all these things. Inspiring, but all felt bad about their bodies. And I often thought of my granny, she died a few years ago, and she was so amazing. She helped so many people. She was an incredible entrepreneur, and really funny. She had a really dirty sense of humor, but she was great. And she was always trying to make herself smaller. And when she passed away, there was this moment when I went to visit her, and I knew it was going to be the last time I saw her. And I was like massaging cream into her hands and her feet and just chatting to her about things. And I remember thinking, you know, you've spent your life not liking your body, and probably all you want now is for it to function so you can maybe give me a hug, or, you know, be able to talk to us. And something at that stage clicked. And then when I returned to my own work later, I started to think, wait, there's this connection between how my grandmother felt and how my mum felt and how I felt. And I need to swap that around and fix it. And since I have fixed it for myself, I can see the positive effect on the women of my family, like going across and also back up. I don't have kids yet, but hopefully, hopefully that'll be positive too. But the positive effect of me feeling good about my body and me saying I'm good enough, and how that makes others say, well, if she's saying she's good enough, then maybe I'm good enough, because actually we look kind of alike.
That makes sense. It makes perfect. And it's really interesting to think of, because like it wasn't in my family, but you would often hear that, like, you know, about the remarks that kind of pass down from parents to kids about, and it will be that like hang up that they have it about themselves, and then they see it, and then they, you know, it's constant like moving. And I wonder, and I guess we touched on this a little bit already, but like the long-term mental health problems that it can have for people who are having these kind of issues with their body.
Oh yeah, like it can develop into such things, because I think we can forget that when we have kids, that if we're very critical of our own bodies, we forget that they're most likely going to look like us because genetics. So what can happen is, and I'll just take a silly example, but let's say everyone in your family has ridiculously large thumbs, like they're insanely large, right? So you grow up and you're like, great, I'm great at thumb wars. I'm great at so
Yeah.
many things. I'm really good at texting. And then someone in your family, like maybe the parent who you got these thumbs from, starts saying, they're really bad, they're really awful.
Mm.
And you start to say, okay, these are really bad, these are really awful. So then maybe you always walk around with your thumbs like inside of your hand by making a fist. Maybe you always have your hands in your pockets. So it starts to show up in little things like
Mm.
this where you start to hide it away. On the inside, you're constantly thinking about it. You're thinking, I'm not good enough because of my thumbs, and I need to like change these, but what can I do? And there's a few things that can happen. You could spend your entire life constantly thinking about them and constantly feeling like you're inferior because of them. And you might do nothing. You might leave them, but hide them away. Or you might go to an extreme level and say, I'm going to have these surgically
Mm.
changed, maybe even removed. You might decide my life is better without thumbs. It's going to make peeling a banana difficult, but look, I'll do it.
I hate bananas. I want to point out, Cliona, I have a fear of bananas, so I have no
All
problem with that.
right. Yeah, no issue with that. I don't know. Let's say cracking an egg open. But
Yeah.
you'd have issues, right? And it would be really difficult. And from the outside, hearing that story, you think to yourself, God, that's so silly. It's just thumbs. Who could really care about having a large thumb? It's so ridiculous. But that's what happens. So we go from the mental part of it is that it's extreme and it feels huge to us and we feel awful about it. And we put all the blame for everything in our lives on those thumbs. Your reaction to it then is another thing. That's the next level. So as I said, it's the hiding them,
Mm.
surgically doing something, or whatever it is that you decide to do. Maybe you just always wear, I don't know, like a little bit of a finger glove on your
Tea
thumbs to
cozy.
hide them.
Yeah.
Yeah, a tea cozy. And again, it sounds ridiculous, but that's what we do.
Yeah.
And we do that with our stomachs, with our weight.
Hmm.
With aspects of ourselves, and all these things like Botox, lip fillers, procedures, they can sound innocent enough to some people, but you really have to ask yourself, what is it that's making you think to yourself that you're not good enough unless you inject something into your
Mm.
face or make something larger or smaller, like these modifications. What are they actually bringing to your life?
Yeah.
And what are you trying to get rid of? What's the thumb in your life? What is the thing that you're placing everything on and deciding it's not good enough and it's making you not good enough?
And the like you mentioned already about that, the like, will it be the end of it once you do, your surgery or whatever, and then it becomes the realization, I guess, when it's not, it hasn't changed everything, and I guess, we've talked to people. We've had Ona Hoey on a long time ago now, actually. It'd be a lot of episodes back to talk about eating disorders, and one that she went through in particular, and the mental health that it brought on. And it's such a long, it's such a wide thing that it can bring, and it's pretty devastating. So you talk also about body confident teens, and that's another thing that I was thinking about, because my nieces, one is obviously already a teen, one's just going to be a teen this year, actually. And what are the signs that maybe a parent could look out for with regards to teens' bodies?
There's a few things. So I would first kind of reevaluate your body image culture in your family. Kind of consider, how have you been communicating about bodies? How's your partner, if you have one? How has the adults closest to your child been communicating about bodies? Because again, that is the primary thing that impacts our body image. We all think it's social media,
Mm.
filters, blah, 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 blah. There's a long list of them. They do have an impact, but they only have an impact if we're already really clued into that.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is, for example, I do not care about sport. Like, it's just not my thing. I do not know who's kicking a ball with who, right?
Fair
That's
enough.
fine. I know what's going on though. There's loads about it in the media. There's
Mm.
loads about it on social media, but I just do not take in any of it, right? The same goes for this stuff if you're just not clued into it. Like, if you have a teenager who's really into football, and they don't have any kind of stuff going on with body
Mm.
image, they're not going to be like, oh, the filter on Snapchat made me feel really bad
Yeah.
about myself. It depends on how clued in we are. So when it comes to teens, how we can know is if they are really feeling impacted by this stuff and you can see it's impacting them and they're
Mm.
really trying to look like, I don't know, Kim Kardashian or something, that's a sign, right? That's something they're clued into this, because the primary stuff has led them to
Mm.
being really impacted by that. The next thing is, you can usually tell if they're spending a huge amount of time on their appearance. Now, teenagers always are going to spend a bit more time on their appearance because they're changing, they're starting to be attracted to people and they're like experimenting with their appearance too. So I'm not talking about like if your teenager's gotten really into wearing eyeliner, like I'm sure they're
Yeah,
fine,
fine. Yeah.
right? Yeah, it's cool. Don't worry about that. But if they're really into it, like,
Mm.
and I mean, like spending hours on it, and you notice that they're like, no, 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 I'm not eating certain foods anymore because maybe they're trying to make themselves a certain size. If they're like spending all their time on their appearance and spending all their free time looking at things to help them change their appearance.
Mm.
If their world is 100% based on their appearance, something's going wrong there. And often, sadly, in society, we praise girls for this. We make them
Mm.
feel like it's a really good thing that they're so into their appearance and they're really into looking after themselves. Not if it's taking up all of your mental energy. You know,
Of
it's
course.
it's not. So these are some of the signs that show up, and it's the same for boys. You can often tell with boys, like you're saying, only wearing that one brand of
Mm.
t-shirt, that can often be a sign. Or if they really like you can tell even just by the way they can hold themselves. Like sometimes
Yeah.
I see teenagers and I'm like, well, I can already tell you're not feeling great because the way you're holding yourself and you're shying away from things, and maybe you just always want to wear that hoodie and hide yourself away and cover yourself. We can go through phases of this, but if it's lasting for longer than a year, it's usually when they first hit puberty, yeah, usually they're a bit like, "Oh my god, I've got boobs." So
Yeah.
I don't really want to, like, show them to everyone,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
But if it just keeps going, there's something going on.
There's
And
another
that's
thing where the language and I won't go into the social media side of things because we kind of know it and we know that it can have that negative impact and um you know certain magazines that tend to focus a lot on, oh, this person put on 2 pound, or that they circle body parts, and it's horrible, obviously. But the negative language that we use, and when I mention negative language, I would use it as well because it's something that I'm used to saying, and I'm not talking horrendously offensive stuff, by the way. That's silly, um, but to say, like, if a person was what I would consider or what someone consider overweight, um, I don't like saying that now. Like, do you know what I mean? It seems like, over what weight, and what are we, what are we judging this on? Because it's some, if we say, like, we often say someone's underweight, someone's overweight. Well, what are we, like? Do we have a measuring tape? Do you know, like, we do the whole thing of the ideal body weight for the person. And if I looked at, like, I'm 6'2", and I've looked it up before, like, what is it, the BMI or whatever.
Mhm.
And I was like, they were saying I was like 2 stone over, and I was like, what? Even I, like, with issues with my upper body, even I'm going, what? Um, so we have this perceived idea of what people should be, and we use this negative language, and I can't imagine how damaging that is for teenagers.
Oh, massively. And the way, like, we just don't realize a lot of the time that we're doing it. Like,
Mm.
some of the ways it can show up is like, let's say someone comes on the screen, you're at home watching Netflix, and you're like, holy moly, that's a weird looking man, or they look awful since, or, this
Mm.
kind of narrative. It
Yeah.
seems harmless, but
Mm.
it's not. Or even saying, like, oh, Mary down the road, she used to be a fine looking woman, and now, these kind of things. Or like back in the day when I was lovely and slim.
Yeah.
Oh, this kind of stuff. It seems so harmless, and they're narratives I hear all the time in Ireland, in particular. They happen in every country, but I just
Mm.
mean the way I just said them. I hear in Ireland all the time. And what happens then is, so you have, for the person saying the comments, what happens is we can sometimes be critical of others because for a second, for a millisecond, it makes us feel better
Mm.
because we're like, okay, there's someone with imperfection. I have imperfections, so therefore I feel a bit better. But then we start to think, well, if I'm judging them, then everyone must be judging me. And we actually
Mm.
spiral and it gets worse and worse and worse. Then for the person hearing the negative comment, that has a ripple effect on everyone else who hears it. So they start thinking to themselves, yeah, like, if like for example, let's say your friend said it and you're like, if my friend who's slimmer than me and prettier than me is saying that that person is ugly and that they're too fat, then what must I be? And this throwaway comment suddenly has the other person spiraling too, going, I'm not good enough. Maybe I should do a diet. Maybe I should do this. Maybe I should do that. And that's why we shouldn't be commenting on others or ourselves negatively to others because it impacts everyone else in that room. And again, it seems so innocent, it seems so throwaway, it's part of usually families' body image culture, but it has such a negative effect on others. And what I always say to clients is like we start to rewrite that narrative. So when they go to like say something negative about someone, whether it's someone they know or don't know, I'm always like, stop yourself and say something positive instead. So
Mm.
it could be like, I love the suit that guy's wearing on the
Mm.
telly. Oh, Mary's such a beautiful woman, like in the way that she is,
Mm.
she's just always has a big smile and she gives great hugs. Or, Granny's just the business. I love the cake she makes. Or it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't matter. But it's just having these positive things. And if you live in an environment where we are constantly hearing positive things, like it doesn't always have to be positive. Nothing in life
No,
is
I
always
know. Yeah,
positive.
yeah.
But generally, the conversation is more based on the positive than the negative. It
Mm.
has a great impact on the people around us. Also, because, if you're sitting with your friend and your friend's like, oh, our friend Jessica, she blah, 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 you're going to feel more secure with that friend
Yeah.
because she's not just sitting there moaning about
Yeah.
everyone. And you think she's going to be moaning about me. And so that's part of it. The other part is that I think our idea of how people should look
Mm.
has really become obscure because so what happens is we have this one idea how celebrity culture should look and people on the telly. We have an acceptance of that people on the street don't look like that,
Mm.
but we still think that we should be held to the standard of what we're seeing on telly.
Yeah.
So there's this disconnect of they look like that, I'm this way, everyone else looks that way, but maybe I'm supposed to look like these people I'm seeing on the telly. And we ignore that everyone around us
Mm.
who like comes from like the same, like, well, mostly the same kind of a background as in, our families have maybe been in the area for a long time. Everyone has maybe like a Irish enough looking look, regards a roundy head and a
Yeah.
curly body or
Yeah.
whatever. And that's how people look. And but we decide, no, 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 no. I need to look like Kim
I
Kardashian.
know.
Like,
Yeah.
where is the logic there? And we sometimes just have to say to ourselves, what am I on about?
I know. Yeah. Cop on a bit. But I think the language that we use, and it's interesting when we talk about the change of language and everything that we used to say, and it comes to race and sexuality and gender, and we're all trying to change that. And I think it should become an extension of what we're talking about when we're talking about bodies. And I kind of like your idea better, though, the switch in the way we're talking about people, because then it doesn't become an issue of how we're using that language. We're just talking about a positive thing that person does, or who they are and the personality and all that. And look, we're still all obsessed with like looks, and we're still on Tinder flicking right and doing all these things. So it's going to take a while to change, but I like to think that there's some shift in it. In the body positivity movement as well is another thing that's kind of moving, and it's great. But can I ask you what took you to Paris?
Oh, so I when I was studying, I did a degree in journalism and I got to spend 6 months studying in the US in Missouri University. And I met all these people that could speak multiple languages.
Mm.
And I was like, that's cool. I started thinking, why am I not doing that?
Yeah.
So I enrolled in French classes. And then after university, I was like, I want to go to another country. I know it's going to be hard, but I want to go learn the language and do this. I think it'd be really cool. So I ended up moving to Milan in Italy for 2 years. And it was great. But after 2 years, I was like, not exactly the spot for me though.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided I'd come to Paris, which was my favorite city. And I made the decision. And then 2 weeks later, I found a job while I was in Milan. And I was like, all right, great. And I moved over to Paris and I had no plan. For the first like 3 months, I was like staying at people's like couches and stuff, particularly if they're away on holiday. They're like, you can stay in my
Yeah.
apartment. So I was like, okay, thank you. And then I finally got myself an apartment and got myself sorted out. And that's really what brought me here. It was just, I want to do it.
Mm.
And then when I moved here, like everything just kind of started to click together in my life. Like
Yeah.
everything was very in flow. And like I met my partner here and I have all these great friendships and everything's just been very, like it's not been like all completely smooth. I've
No, of
had some
course.
things that like kind of cracked me open and moved me forward in a positive way, but it's been such a good choice for me. So I'm gonna stay here, I think, but I
Mm.
still pop back to Ireland all the time, which is good.
I I like the going from somewhere which is very small and rural as you described, to going to Paris. I think that's a lovely thing. How great has it been able to, with the coaching regards to on the go now? Because obviously Zoom is a huge part of it now. Um, do you enjoy being able to do it on camera as well? As opposed to like a face to face thing.
Oh yeah, like I used to do it in person before, and now I've completely moved over to Zoom.
Okay.
And my clients prefer it too because it means that they don't have to physically get to me. And also I work with people all over the world. So like I'll have like clients in places like Australia, Guatemala, like really random places. And I'm like, okay, great. I can work with them wherever they are. So it suited me so well. And it means to be able, if someone hears what I'm doing and they feel like they connect to it, they know that they can work with me. It's not like, well, there's no one like this in my local area. And even I get a lot of people from Ireland, from rural areas, particularly in the West Coast, where they can't find support like me locally. But I'm like, I'm here. And the great thing is you just have to like pick up your phone or open up your laptop and you're here with me. And it took me like maybe a session or two to get used to it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, you know what? It's pretty much the same.
Yeah.
You see me, I see you. Like,
Yeah. I didn't. At the start, I refused to do the Zoom thing, with this podcast. And I did like 10 solo episodes and I thought, oh no, that's too much hard work. So I went to Zoom and it's great. Like, but like you said, it was just one or two of them. And then I was like, well, it's fine. Like, you get the same out of it. What do you like to do in your spare time?
Oh, I'm one of those people who has a lot of hobbies. I'm really into like sewing. I've been sewing since I was like 6. I'm
Wow.
really into cooking. Like
Right.
I can cook. I'm really into cooking. And one of the things I also really like to do is it's not really like a hobby that you can explain under one little word, but I really like to pick like random places on the map and I'll go visit that place. And maybe I'll take my bike and actually cycle there, or I'll get the train to the place and just go explore it for the day.
Nice.
I'm really into that. So I feel like the things I need to do to make myself feel good are to be creative and to explore and learn from exploring. So cooking really helps me be creative because if I didn't get a chance to work on a creative project, I'm still creative when I cook. And then always, I find that really hard during lockdown, actually not being able to like physically go to places because I love learning in this way. I think travel is the best education that there is. And you don't have to go far. You can literally like go to like the neighboring village and go to the museum there that you've never been to or whatever. Like it's very accessible in the point of it's not about going to the other side of the world. It's going to some little place you've never been to before and just enjoying it.
Yeah, it sounds great. Like it's ideal. And I don't think we do enough of that in Ireland, to be honest. I think there's, and I'm including myself, by the way, I've just not exploring these beautiful places that, I just pick, like you say, pick something on the map and go. Can I ask, like, because Paris is renowned for its food, has your menu changed much since you've been there?
I was already really into French food before
Okay.
I moved here, so I was already cooking a lot of French stuff. But definitely the bread and the cheese have improved on that point.
Very nice.
But yeah, I cook a lot of Irish stuff. I also cook a lot of things from Milan that I picked up, a lot of
Okay.
things from here, and like I'm really into everything. I cook a lot of stuff. I've actually ruined going to restaurants for myself because every time I go, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna learn how to make that. That was really good. And
Yeah,
then I learn how to make it, and then I'm like, oh, well, why would I go pay someone else more for it? So now
it's true.
my partner's always complaining about that. He's like, oh, what's left? And I was like, okay, I promise I won't learn how to make Vietnamese food.
But like
But that's so good.
he must be loving life though. If you're really like into cooking and you like cooking good food, it's not just like throwing out some like spaghetti hoops or something, whatever. I don't know why I picked that. But you know what I mean? Like that's that's the dream, like to have a partner who's really good at cooking.
I think he's quite content.
Yeah.
We're getting married in a few weeks, so I
How are
think he's
you?
quite content. Yeah.
Ah, congratulations in
Thank you.
advance. I hope you have a beautiful day. Listen, the most important question, where can people find you?
So you can find me on my website, which is
Mhm.
cleanabyrne.com. Nice and easy, just my name.com. And then I'm also on Instagram. So I'm Cliona_the_coach.
I was actually looking for you last night and I was just putting in clean burn. So now I can find you. I'll get you on there. But are you on Facebook as well, or is it just
No, just the two
okay?
of those. And
Yeah.
and also I forgot to mention, I have a free body confidence journal on my website. So if anyone wants it, you can get it. And I give lots of like really great tools there on how you can improve your body image. So that's there if anyone wants it too.
Excellent. I will obviously put the link into the website. But You've really good blog posts on there. I was reading some of the. I read the one that you talked about putting the screws in your face.
Yeah.
Actually, just last night. Actually, I just read that. But Cliona, you have been an absolute joy to speak to, and a very easy person to interview. I'll be honest. It's great, and that is the highest compliment I can pay someone, because it means that I've done very little to contribute, but all the stuff is really good and interesting. And I'm so happy that we could set it up and get it going, because I know people who will need this and who may not even know that there's people out there to help them, So you've been wonderful. If you don't mind just sticking around to close this out, I'll get a quick photo and then we'll be on our way.
Excellent.
So I also want to thank John, who always does the tech, and everybody knows John at this stage. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you would. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And the podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, Anchor, Google Podcasts. There's a few other ones. There is going to be a day where I'm going to learn them, but for now, today is not the day. I can't remember. There's no, I don't know, something to do with radio. But anyway, thanks everyone for tuning in and watching and listening to this. Cliona, once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And as the title of the podcast suggests, we will see you next week. So take care, everyone. Bye.